Hi, I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, if you watched the show before, we cover a wide variety of topics, from man overboard to insurance. And the idea is to give you a little bit of information that will help you make smarter decisions and have more fun on the water. Today's show is right up that alley. It's on fuel economy, and joining me is a local, very experienced boater, Walter Riley. Walter?
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Walter. Walter, we got a great show here today.
Great.
One that's, I'm sure, on many people's mind as they go boating. But before we get into it, can you share a little bit about your boating background?
Sure, Paul. I grew up in the Midwest, and I did considerable boating on Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, also lakes and rivers in Wisconsin. Moved here to the North Shore about 50 years ago.
Oh.
And I've had considerable time both on the water between Newburyport and Boston. I've used both Grady Whites, time on Sea Rays, and Boston Whalers.
Okay. And you're a member of the Power Squadron these days, right?
I am. I'm a 20-year member of the United States Power Squadron.
Yeah.
And that's a voluntary organization across the country, 25,000 members. And our mission is safe boating and safe boating education.
Okay. Well, that's a great mission, and that really kind of dovetails in the show we're going to do today. So, sounds like you got just the right experience, so why don't we get started?
Let's go for it.
Okay. Walter, you know, gas prices are through the roof this year, and a lot of boaters are really worried about the impact on their fuel budget, which understandably so. So I thought we'd pull out some select points that could help both new boaters and existing owners increase their miles per gallon or their fuel economy on the water. And I thought we'd start by talking about boat sizes and designs. Do you see people making mistakes in that? I mean, we've got a couple examples with us right now. We've got a cruiser on our left and we've got our center console on the right. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Paul, there are two key points when you're talking MPG. I see a lot of new boaters purchase the mid-size cruiser, which are much heavier, when they could do just as well with the center console. The cruiser is heavier because of freshwater systems, cabin, and cooking systems.
Yeah.
And
all that's great if you need it. If you got a small family,
right,
you're gonna be overnighting. You're gonna need that. But if you're just going out for a day of fishing,
it's going to burn a lot more fuel than you want.
Yeah, you probably don't need all that. It probably a center console might be a better fit for you. We're not advocating one or the other. We're just saying the right boat for the right application.
That's right.
Right. Yep. Okay.
The other point is in terms of design. Many purchasers buy a deep hull, a deep V hull on their boats.
Like the shape of that bifold you got there.
Exactly.
It's a deep V.
And it provides a nice ride out to your favorite fishing area.
Yeah.
However, they should consider the modified V hull.
Okay, we'll flare it out a little bit.
Absolutely. And will do just as well and burn considerably less fuel.
All right. So pick the right boat for the application and pick the right underbody for what you're going to be boating in.
Absolutely.
Okay. Walter, you know, once you pick your hull size and the configuration, the next decision typically is how you're going to power the boat. And oftentimes the choice today for small power boats is either an outboard or an inboard outboard. And, you know, I went to do a little research on what the differences might be and between the fuel economy of today's modern outboard versus a modern inboard outboard. And quite frankly, my personal results were inconclusive. I didn't find much of a difference. One might have been 3 nautical miles per gallon, the other one might have been 3 and change. So I would suggest to people that my understanding is that the outboard's going to be probably a little more economical, a 4-stroke outboard, because it's less weight. An outboard is maybe 400 to 500 pounds less than the typical inboard outboard. So if someone's like super keyed up about fuel economy, the outboard of the same size and a 4-stroke is probably going to give them a little more fuel economy, but
Very little difference.
Very little difference, and unless they're using the boat constantly, it may not be a factor for somebody.
That's right.
So let's talk about if we move from stern drives, IOs, and outboards straight to outboards. A little history.
Sure.
People probably have heard a lot two-strokes. They've heard
Yes.
of a two-stroke outboard, and we have a piston here, and just to exemplify what a two-stroke is, it just both two-strokes and four-strokes, they have many of the same internals, but when they call them two-stroke, that means it just goes, this piston moves up and down twice to generate power.
Exactly.
Whereas a four-stroke, a piston similar to this, makes a motion 4 times.
That's right.
And it gives you slightly different characteristics. So if we look at the two-strokes, which were where outboards were 20
Very
years
popular.
ago, 30 years ago, yeah, they tend to be lighter and a little smaller, a little less complicated.
Yes.
But on the other side, they have higher emissions because of the way they burn the oil and the gas together, and the way their design is in terms of the power output. So sometimes their design can result in slightly less efficient from a mile per gallon perspective than a four-stroke.
Right.
I think you've got an example here of carburetors, which again, 20, 30, 40 years ago, these were what you would get
Exactly.
on a motor.
This is
And they had a certain impact on your fuel economy. If someone's buying a used boat, they may very well see engines that have carburetors on them. So they're not bad necessarily. No. They're just not as efficient as one of the fuel-injected newer two-strokes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How about four-strokes? So with that as kind of a foundation, what's your perspective on the four-strokes and how they fit into this miles per gallon formula, if you will?
Well, Paul, the four-stroke has a fuel train assembly and a
valve train.
oil system.
Yes.
That is very much like an automobile engine.
Yes.
But they're much more efficient and lighter. Well, they're heavier, but they're more efficient than your two-stroke.
Yes.
And give you much better fuel economy.
Yes. It could be up to 50% in some cases, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So four-stroke, you see they're becoming more and more popular these days for good reasons. They typically are delivering substantially more fuel economy than the old two-strokes like the one we just showed them with the carburetors, right?
That's right.
Yeah. You know, in terms of fuel economy, sometimes people new to boating make a mistake. They think, well, if I want to get fuel economy on the land with a car, I'd get a small car. Small car, small engine, economically go down the road. Big car, big engine, not very economical. Right. So they transpose that logic onto boating, and that's really the wrong way to go, right?
Absolutely. It's the opposite.
Yeah. How does it work? Yeah.
Well, the larger engine, actually, even though it's heavier, is much more fuel efficient than your smaller ones.
And that's because it's working less hard, right?
That's right.
So a marine engine is always working because it's always in resistance, which is water.
Right.
So in contrast to an automotive engine, which gets to rest a lot,
right,
because it's low friction.
Large engines don't have to work as hard.
Right. So you get that large engine, and so it's a little bit counterintuitive, but it's something that people remember.
It's true.
If they want more miles per gallon, usually popping for the slightly larger engine is actually the way to go. Mm-hmm. You know, another thing that people probably should be aware of is this controversy about dual engines or single engines, and I did a little research on that, and I took down some notes. I saw a report that had a single 250 at 26 miles an hour got just over 3.15 miles per gallon.
Right.
They take the same hull, which is a 24-footer, and with twins of about the same horsepower total at roughly the same speed, they get about 3.03.
Not much difference.
Pretty close, right? They did a single 300 going 23 miles an hour, 3.98 miles per gallon, and twin 150s, same horsepower, about the same speed, 3.11.
Same result.
Yeah.
Not much difference.
Yeah, very surprising actually. I thought that the drag from the two drives would really affect the miles per gallon, but it didn't seem to in the tests that we looked at.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
So that's an interesting thought. Another point that I think is a key one is once you've selected your engine, to keep it tuned up, right?
Absolutely. The basic idea is that you want fuel to flow freely and the plugs
Yep.
to fire cleanly.
Right.
And with new oil and lubricants,
Yeah.
you don't impede, there isn't that resistance to the rotation.
Right. So ideally, you'd probably replace these plugs once a year, right?
Absolutely.
Make sure they fire off nice. And you've got a gas filter there. It's in line.
Right.
This is another filter here. And again, that having the clean gas, clean tuned plugs, everything set, that's going to help your fuel economy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hydrodynamics play a big role in fuel economy, and we've got a little outdrive here, and it really shows how hydrodynamic, it's like a bullet shape down here where the gear case is.
Right.
And then you've got the propeller as well. So these are two key ingredients to getting a lot of miles per gallon out of your boat. We're going to come back and revisit that in a second.
Sure.
But I thought we'd talk a little bit about props. Here's an example of a prop here. And most people talk about them in terms of diameter. So the space between this tip and this tip, for example.
Right.
And pitch. And pitch is how far each time this turns 360 degrees, or one revolution, it's how far the boat goes forward, theoretically, right?
That's right.
So people talk about props and diameter and pitch. And then the pitch will, again, give you very different characteristics. So once people understand that, I got a propeller, I got a diameter, I got a pitch, what should they be aiming for in terms of manufacturer's recommendations?
Well, you want to have a prop that when the throttle is wide open, you want that revolutions per minute to be at within 500 revolutions per minute of the factory specifications.
Of the factory settings, yeah. That way
Right.
you know you get the right prop for your boat and the load you're working with.
That's right.
Yeah,
Now, for the older engines, you want to have them tuned.
the prop's tuned.
Have the props tuned, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And what does that mean, tuning the prop?
Well, taking it back to having someone that's going to clean them and make sure there's nothing on barnacles or anything.
Right. They're back to factory tolerances,
That's
right?
right.
You're bringing them back to
And the
factory
pitch
tolerances.
is correct.
Right, right. Okay, so this is an example of aluminum prop, and what is often popular these days is stainless steel props. This one weighs a lot heavier than this aluminum one, and these have some different characteristics than the aluminum props, right?
That's right. They are heavier.
They are heavier.
But they are less resistant to stress.
Right, they're stronger, right? This is a stronger material right here.
Absolutely.
Stainless is stronger than aluminum.
And they're thinner.
Yeah,
So,
because they're stronger, right? Now
That's right.
Now we can use a thinner blade.
That's right.
Right, so how that helps your fuel efficiency, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Big difference.
Right, and underway, they're not going to flex. So whatever the pitch was, that thing, the angle of attack,
Right.
it's going to stay the same because they have the strength. Even though they have the thin blades, the pitch stays the same.
Yeah.
So you get that constant efficiency outcome, if you will.
Less drag through the water.
Right.
Makes it Much more fuel efficient.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a trade-off people can make.
Right.
They can get a stainless steel prop if they want to increase the fuel economy. And then we're back to our little drive here. It's a little baby one, but if you look at any outboard drive or an IO drive, it'd be the same thing. What I find is that I have an IO, and I launch, I don't know, early June. I pull, I don't know, October. About August, I get a tremendous amount of growth here in this area, and particularly on the prop. And I can feel it when I use the throttle. I can feel the boat going physically slower. So it's an important point to keep an eye on that, right?
Absolutely, and clean them. Yeah. Make sure they're clean.
Yeah.
And the longer they're in the water, the more chance there'll be barnacles and other things attached. Sea life will attach itself to the props.
Yeah. And I've got a spray here, actually. This is a prop spray that you can use and spray on, and that will help the situation, right?
Keeps them off. Keeps the barnacles off.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about load. The load that the boater is asking his engine to handle. And it really changes as the season progresses, right?
It does. We have an expression called accessory creep.
Okay.
And that's when the boater brings coolers and toys and boom boxes and all these accessories. And it's cumulative. Every time they come aboard, they bring something else. So
Right.
that just adds to the weight
Yeah.
and load on the motors.
Which is going to reduce their miles per gallon.
That's right.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Another source that people may not really be tied into or think about are the fluids they keep on board. So you've got gas, you get water, other things. Those can add up, right?
They add a lot. Let's take your average gallon of gasoline.
Yeah.
It weighs 8 pounds. Or is that 6?
That's 6 pounds.
That's 6 pounds.
The gas
Okay.
weighs 6 pounds, right?
Okay. And then when you have a gallon of water,
Right.
that's your 8 pounds.
Right, exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
So adding 100 gallons of water, 800 pounds.
It's a lot of weight.
Yes, exactly. And that, again, reduces your fuel efficiency.
Right, right. And then there's a third thing that we can talk about in this category. That's your hull, right? So when you launch it in the spring, it's nice and clean. It's got the anti-fouling. Everything's good. There's no barnacles or anything on it. But as the season progresses, it sits in the mooring at the dock. This stuff grows, and that can really cut into your miles per gallon. So you really want to invest in a good quality hull paint. Right?
And there are a number of them.
Yeah.
And keeping that hull clean is very important. Also for your IO, we have brand new copper-free paints that we use that will also help you with fuel efficiency and our performance.
Beautiful. The way you operate a rig can have a big difference, big impact on the miles per gallon. And some people would tend to leave their motors idling at the dock quite a bit, won't they?
Don't idle at the dock. You need to warm up your engine.
Yep.
But get out and get on the water smartly.
Yeah. All right. So don't idle at the dock. Move out. Now, how about once you clear the harbor and you clear the 5 mile per hour buoys? Should you keep idling, or what should you do?
No. Again, particularly with the 2-strokes, you don't want to be idling out there.
Right.
And once you get out there, enjoy it. And
So you want to get on a plane, right?
And get on the plane.
Get on a plane.
Get that bow aspect up, bow up aspect, and
Right.
use the planing hull.
So typically they're planing hulls, so you want to come off idle. Idle's a nice speed, and it's nothing wrong with using idle if you want to take your time, as long as you're not concerned with miles per gallon that day.
Right.
But if you're concerned with miles per gallon, you want to push that planing hull up on a plane, because that's where it's more sufficient, right?
Less water resistance.
Less water resistance, right. Now, how about, you just mentioned the bow, the attitude of the bow relative to the horizon. How about if the passenger load is like unevenly distributed and you're kind of dragging the stern a little bit?
Here's where you use trim, Paul. Trim is very important. Get that bow up, get on the planing hull, but also balance the load.
Right.
If you've got passengers, all the passengers in the stern, ask 1 or 2 to come up with you, and so you have that proper planing hull.
Right. So that's probably the easiest way to do it. Redistribute your load first.
Right.
And so you get as close as you can to a level running attitude.
Right.
And then, like you say, use the trim to do the final adjustments, so you get that nice angle of attack, low resistance, high miles per gallon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good.
Interestingly, most engines have a sweet spot in terms of the fuel economy that they can achieve when they're running.
That's right.
You know, and I read some reports in some local boating magazines. I just share with you some statistics. They used a 40-foot catamaran with 4 300 horsepowers. Yeah, it's pretty substantial. At 5,900 RPM, they were doing 51 knots, and they burned 100 gallons per hour, which is it translates to a half a nautical mile per gallon.
Right.
Now, just by cutting the throttle back to 3,000 RPM, they'd go 24 knots, about half the speed.
Right.
They'd burn like a quarter of their gallons per hour, and they double the nautical miles per gallon. So that's pretty impressive. Here's another example. I got 3 examples. One's a 28-foot chaparral with an IO in it, a V8 IO in it.
Sure.
Again, at wide open throttle, which is about 5,900 RPM. You're doing 40 knots, 28 gallons per hour,
Hey.
1.4 nautical miles per gallon.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you chop it down from 5,900 to 3,500, you're going 20 knots, still substantial.
Yeah.
But your fuel burn's gone from 28 to 8 gallons per hour, and your nautical miles per gallon is basically doubled.
Right.
And one last example here is a 22-foot 4 winds with a Mercury 250 on it,
Right.
an outboard. Wide open throttle again, 44 knots, really clipping along, 22 gallons per hour, and 1.9 nautical miles per gallon. Not bad, but if you cut the throttle from 59 to 3,500, you're going roughly half the speed, 24 knots, but your fuel burn is a third of what it was per hour. So now it's instead of 22, it's 7 gallons. And your nautical miles per gallon goes from 1.9 nautical miles per gallon at wide open throttle to 3.42.
Yep.
So basically it doubles.
Exactly.
So what do you take away as the key lesson there?
Well, the key is if you drop your throttle to half, you can double your fuel economy.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So that's really an important lesson when you're trying to get good mileage, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Well, we had another point here I had written down, and it had to do with pre-planning. You know, a lot of people go out, me included, you'd go out and you'd go from spot to spot. You wouldn't think too much about it. But if you're trying to maximize your miles per gallon, it's probably best to do a little pre-planning, right?
That's right. But you want to have fun on the water,
Right,
you know?
right.
And so take your short trips. That's a key. Have short trips, and also you can take shortcuts, you know, direct to your destination. But always pre-plan and check your chart plotter or your charts and make sure you have enough water under the hull when you're going out there.
Good point. Good point. So pre-plan, look for the shortcuts, but be safe.
And you'll save money on fuel.
Right. Right.
Clearly.
Well, Walter, it's hard to believe, but it's time to wrap up the show. And we've covered a lot of mileage, if you will, today on this topic of gas mileage. And we started with hull designs and configurations and sizes, and we talked about propellers, and we talked about sweet spots, and some various things I think will make a real difference in people's ability to get good miles per gallon out there when they're on the high seas. Do you have anything to add before we wrap up the show?
Paul, I really want to thank you for letting me be your guest today. This has been very helpful, I hope. You know, there's the thing I like to do best is help boaters trim their costs.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that Power Squadron is very interested in. We offer a number of seminars and class courses that do just that.
Okay.
And locally, here on the North Shore, you can find this list of our courses and seminars on our website. It's www.abcnorthshore.org.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for joining us. If you have any comments or questions or just want to see another show, join us on our website, smartboatingus.com. Thank you.